Hi, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today, where we're going to be stepping into the wellies of some of the AgriTech businesses that are residents of our Eagle Lab network. My name is Wendy Hewitson, and I'm the AgriTech Programme Manager within Eagle Labs. As with all of our presentations, I need to do a mandatory disclaimer, and then we'll get on with the exciting stuff. So we have asked Richard Hobson from Herdsy and Gareth Davies from Yagro to join us today to provide us with some tips and tricks on the topic of stepping into the wellies of an AgriTech business within the Eagle Lab network. The topics discussed are an overview of options for you to think about to help you with your independent research and business decisions. So they aren't intended as recommendations or advice. Please remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances, and as such, the statements and views expressed may not be applicable for your business. So as I said, we're looking at stepping into the wellies of some of the AgriTech businesses that are residents within our Eagle Lab network. But what is Eagle Labs? What is Barclays Eagle Labs? So Barclays Eagle Labs is the UK's largest network of business incubators, providing access to a community of startups, event programming, industry experts, mentors, and rapid prototyping support, with a combined community of over 650 technology startups across our 25 locations. Our goal is around developing a scaled and engaged founder community with a wider, innovative entrepreneurial ecosystem. So what are we looking at? We're looking at accelerating UK businesses. We're looking at supporting high potential and high growth technology businesses that are starting and scaling up, connecting them in an AgriTech perspective with the startups to the research and development expertise, the farmers, and across the supply chain. We also look at collaborative innovation. So in the face of emerging technologies and disruption across all industries, there's never been a better time to connect the startup community to established corporates, to exchange their ideas, to partner up with them, and innovate together, stimulating innovation and collaboration across the food supply chain. Also, we look at Industry 4.0, and that is providing access to training on evolving technologies, skills, providing and facilitating a role in encouraging positive innovation and disruption. For AgriTech and the agriculture sector specifically, we're looking at demystifying Industry 4.0 for our 30,000 farming clientele and try to become the voice of the farmer to the industry. The AgriTech programme is looking to we number one bank for innovation in agriculture. We're looking to support the UK food supply chain to become the most sustainable ecosystem in the world through the demystification of technology and encouraging that collaboration pan supply chain. Quite simply, putting it as feed the world without wrecking the planet. So as I mentioned, we're all here around Agriculture 4.0. And for me, that is simply a tool to support, not to replace the farmer. And that covers areas such as increasing productivity, assessing sustainable options, looking at improving efficiencies, and most importantly, looking at saving the farmer time. So who better to get a better understanding of what we do within Eagle Labs and what it's like to be a resident within our Eagle Lab network. So as I said, I'm joined today by Gareth Davies from Yagro and Richard Hobson from Herdsy, who are both AgriTech residents in our Eagle Lab network. So let's get together now and hear firsthand what it means to be an AgriTech resident within Eagle Labs. So hi guys, how are you doing today?
Hey Wendy, good morning, how are you?
Great. So as I've said, I've brought you guys here because it's really important, I think, for the people joining us today to understand what it's like being a resident within our Eagle Labs network. And I said, you are the guys that are there. You're on the ground doing this. So could you, I think I'll come to you first, Gareth. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure, happy to, and thanks, Wendy, for having me along to this. I'm Gareth Davies. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Yagro, based here in Cambridge, and I'm sure I will talk plenty about the business in a second. My background's probably slightly less conventional in the ag space. I'm not from the farming background myself. I'm actually a chemist by training, and I've done several years in business consultancy out of London. Went on to do my MBA at London Business School, and that's when I discovered the wonderful world of agriculture at the time through Syngenta, which is the global leader in crop protection and one of the majors in seed. And I went and joined the leadership program at Syngenta out in Basel at their headquarters, and spent a few years doing business model innovation, venture capital, and really looking at how does this industry, this huge, fascinating industry that is agriculture, how does it change? How does it evolve from what it has been probably for the last 50 years into what it might look like for the next generation? And I think, I find that a very exciting and very interesting change, full of opportunity. So I'm now, full-time CEO at Yagro, and on the side, I'm a member of the board at the Royal Agricultural Society of England, and a member of the board on a Pan-African agronomy technology company. So I've got a few fingers in places, ag tech related, let's put it that way.
Fab. You have been everywhere, haven't you? And is that the same for you, Richard? What's your background? And tell us a bit about yourself, please.
All right. My background is basically, I was initially a software engineer, and then I decided to do the opposite to most people who learn to code. I became an accountant, decided to become a chartered accountant. So I'm kind of equally boring on both sides of the scale, if you want to put it that way. What I think it really stood to me is that I had a really diverse background, a bit very much like our other guest there. And I think it really stood to me because a lot of people in agriculture, don't seem to have the same skill set. The farmers are really good and very diverse skills. But I think if you come into agri-tech, you have to solve a lot of varied and different problems, not just in one sphere. So I think that really stood to me. I've worked for other companies such as IBM and big companies like that. But about 4 years ago, I got this strange idea to start this company. So that's really where it came from. It came from an idea to scratch my own family's itch, but we'll talk about that later, somewhere down the track. But yeah, my background has been a bit diverse. I've gone the opposite way. Most people, start as an accountant to learn to code. I did it the opposite way, but that's pretty much how I do things anyway, quite opposite to trend. I'm a bit of a contrarian at heart, I think.
Really interesting.
To be in this game.
I am from a farming background, so as I say, it's nice to see a different perspective. Probably, so you maybe answered some of this, but how did your journey then lead you into the world of agri-tech and agriculture? Why agriculture? Let's come to yourself first on that one, Richard. Well,
agriculture was fascinating to me. About 4 years ago, I looked at the company because I saw a big gap in the space. 80% of the world's food is created by somebody in a rural environment, and that's a fact. And there's so little tech there. When I was looking at it, my family were part-time beef farmers part-time beef farmers at the moment are suffering a lot, especially across Europe, because the prices are actually low. And in certain places, the prices are actually below the cost of production. So the farmers are making a continuous loss. So that it's a necessity for a beef farmer to have a part-time job. So very similar to that, my family were kind of small-time beef farmers. They had to go to other jobs, as my father said. Farming was the most expensive hobby he ever had. And they would always kind of be getting wiped out on it. So what interests me in agriculture is that I saw the potential that technology had brought to other spheres, like the dairy industry and in other areas in financial and banking, but it seemed to be very absent in ag tech. And the reason I think that ag tech seemed to me at the time, by 2016, to be upside down, in that the smaller farmer, the little guy, didn't have a chance, didn't have any access to technology, while the more wealthier farmers were being targeted by very large companies who had billions in turnover, these big tech companies. And they just didn't seem to care about kind of the smaller little guy. And I just thought that was totally wrong. And that's why it's in our tagline, farming for everyone, because we believe that farming technology should be available for all, regardless of income.
And yourself, Gareth, what was your journey in the world of agriculture?
Yeah, look, I'd echo a lot of what Richard has said there. From me, on a personal note, as I mentioned earlier, At the time I started agriculture, I was really fascinated in how do major industries change and reinvent themselves through what is some pretty turbulent environmental context. At the moment, it has been for the last 10 years. You've got these big macro trends in agriculture, from huge generational change that's happening on the farm to much better connectivity to much better cloud-based technology made available. So I think a general movement towards consolidation and professionalization. That's not just UK, that's right across the world. And those confluences of, let's say, trends and pressures, I think, are going to result in a very large, gradual, this is still agriculture and things do happen at a pace. There's going to be a gradual shifting in the power dynamics and the structure and the landscape of farming. And I hope to play a part in making sure that the farmer at the end of the day is central to that and not taken for granted.
Exactly. And it is such an amazing industry to be part of. Probably one thing that I'd like to go a little bit deeper in is, can you tell us what your AgriTech business actually does and what part of the sector it covers in a little bit more detail? So I'll come to you first on that one, Gareth.
Yeah, happy to. So Yagro was born 5 years ago now, and fundamentally, when you boil it down, we exist to empower farmers to make better business decisions. And that's really at the core of what we try to do. Our focus has been so far, let's say, the more progressive arable farming company or farmer, where we've seen again and again this burning unmet need for professional farm management tools, farm management solutions, right? And we do this at the heart of who we are at Yagro. We're software, data, technology, and farming guys. So there's a bit of a mishmash, but really we do it through data and technology tools, hence the AgTech label. And we work with farmers and their existing advisors, independent advisors, to help reach the best decisions and outcome for the business. So the two main flagship services that we offer, tools that we offer, we started off with a marketplace, an online marketplace for farms to procure their bulk inputs. So if you want 10,000 liters at the drop of a hat, then we can arrange that and connecting you directly with all your suppliers to get live quotes in the market. And the journey has taken us, and I'll talk a bit more about this probably later on, but the journey's taken us much more towards analytics now, and I think that's reflective of who we are as a team. So we do a huge amount of data analytics, and I'm personally really excited at a new launch we've got this autumn around our Yagro analytics tool, which is really dragging all of the data we can from a farmer, all of their commercial data, their business data, what they're applying on the field, what they're paying, what their yields are, and processing that into a very quick and easy to navigate cost of production tool. So farmers really understand what's going on in the business and can really identify and do something about the opportunities they're in the face of a BPS payment, which was going out the window, economic pressure anyway, and all the usual things that we know very well in this industry.
Really interesting. And I suppose it's the same question to you then, Richard. What sector are you supporting, and what support does it deliver for agriculture?
Well, in a nutshell, we put collars like this onto guys like this, these little guys like this. And what we do is we concentrate on profitability, which is the #1 issue for farmers globally. A lot of collar companies concentrate on the Fitbit of farming idea, which is health metrics. Health is fine, but profitable animals are much, much better. After much of my conversations with farmers, I have never yet had a conversation where a farmer said he couldn't sleep at night because one of his animals wasn't as healthy as it could have been. But a lot of them can't sleep because they need to keep the roof over their head, they need to keep the payments on the Jeep, they need to make a living. A lot of people tend to forget that farming is a business, and as a business, it has to turn a profit. And that's where we come in. We maximize an animal in the minimum amount of time. We enable farmers to gain from cash flow benefits, from feeding, not extra feeding costs by reducing the time on farm. And then lastly, what we do is we enable non-productive GHG emissions. So the animal is not alive long enough to give out unproductive GHG emissions. So it's good for the pocket and it's good for the environment at the same time. And that is in essence what we do. We basically use telemetric data from the animal, And we basically set up base stations on a farm and collars on the animals. And then we monitor the animals and tell the farmer when it's time to sell, when the animal is ready, or if the animal is in distress or has a health issue. That's in a nutshell what we do here, we do at Herdsy.
So just give me a one-liner of what problem is your AgriTech solution providing for the industry? Just one quick sentence. Yourself, Richard, first.
We maximise an animal in the minimum amount of time.
And yourself, Gareth?
We help you make business decisions based on real data. Fab.
So, as I said, you've both been, residents, and you are very much, going through a startup position, evolving and changing. So you'll have very different experiences in bringing your innovative idea to life. Could you tell me a bit more about sort of that journey? Gareth, please.
Wendy, there's a book in this at some stage, so you're asking me to give away some spoilers there. Look,
Great secret.
It's been a 5-year journey, which has been absolutely fantastic for myself, and I hope and I think for the rest of the team. We've had all the ups and downs that you might almost cliched expect from a startup. But it's, look, if I were to pick one thing that's happened recently, we're probably now coming out of a 2-year journey to build this market-leading data analytics capability from where we started around a marketplace and real procurement. And so that in itself has been a really interesting change, bringing, it's a small team, it's a small organization, but we've got some fantastic customers, I think a pretty good reputation in what we do and did, and taking that, even as a small outfit, taking that forward into repositioning a little bit and doing a much wider role and a much tighter relationship on farm. You've got to reinvent the people that you've got in the team, right? The skills that you're focusing on, the competencies that you're interested in, to an extent, the culture that you're driving, and then you need to take your customers on board with that. It's, there's so much shifting, there's so much adaptation that goes on in an ag tech startup, in any startup. Navigating that and pushing through it and keeping a very firm eye on where it is that you're going is a real challenge, but a real pleasure and a real honor to be able to lead.
Fab. And yourself, Richard, has yours varied, or has it been like a similar? What's have you gone through then?
I suppose, like any startup, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride. There's obviously highs and lows, but as regards some of the highlights, and I think in our first year we won most innovative ag tech product in China. That was pretty cool. Considering that we didn't have anyone in China and no product in China whatsoever, and it was all based on a presentation that we sent over to a customer who then decided to enter us into a competition that we knew nothing about. That was a particularly good highlight. I remember getting a few calls from people in Whitehall and stuff like that about it, which was a surprise to me. So getting calls from people in very high up places in Downing Street was great. I thought it was the tax man after me, but there we go. I suppose there was some other great highlights. Actually, has been obviously being in Cambridge. We were included in the top 21, which has been a great honor for us to do that, being such a outsiders not only to the Cambridge but also to the UK. And also then I think one of our best highlights at the moment is what we have planned currently, which is actually our plan to actually go ahead and to launch into Texas. We've been extremely well received now in Texas by the University of Texas and Texas A&M. Which is great, and this is going to be a fantastic journey going forward for us to bring our cattle technology to the home really of cattle, which is the Premier League of cattle for us. And at least I've got the hat for it now, So that's so the wardrobe is okay, so that's great. So there were some of the big highlights of what we've done, I suppose.
So on the flip of that, really, there must have been some really big challenges that you've had to overcome. I don't want to put a downer on the talks, but give me, a snippet of what those have been for yourself. Go on then, Richard, you go first.
No problem. I think you've got to enjoy the highs because they're very small. They come in little small doses, and I think it's a bit like just enough to keep you going to the next one. And when there's lows, there are a lot more lows and a lot more highs, and I can think Gareth will probably say something similar. Some of the lows actually, are there to test you, but you've got to kind of dust yourself off and bring yourself back up. I mean, we had a few knockbacks. We didn't get grants that we thought we were going to get. With COVID-19, one of our big contracts was cancelled. because in South Africa, because the South African government banned all outside visitors till 2021. And it's a question of just kind of learning to just take the punches. I always say in startups, it's not how many things you win or how many punches you give, it's how many punches you can take and still get up and keep going. I think one of the great highlights of Herdsy is that we're still going 4 years later, which is for any startup a phenomenal thing to do. But I would just say to people that, you've got to be very resilient. You've got to be very mentally resilient to when it comes to lows, and you've got to have really good people behind you supporting you and understanding, partner, spouse, wife, husband. You've got to have them in place, and there's key people in and your mental health is extremely important. Never sacrifice your mental health for a business.
Really, that's really so true, actually, Richard. And Gareth, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I'll echo a lot of what Richard said. Right, our highlights are always the small wins in front of customers when we show customers a solution, particularly with this new stuff that we've built, and we get the reactions that we do, some of which are really rude, and I probably can't mention on this, but in a really positive way. Maybe that's one for offline, Wendy. It's really gratifying, right? It justifies why you've spent years doing this and pumping a lot of money, a lot of investor money, a lot of government funding money, right, as well. So you take those small wins and you celebrate with the team, and hopefully they're coming sort of frequently enough. The challenge is same. We've had some knocks. We set our stall out early on in the journey to say we're going to focus entirely on adding value to the farmer, and we're never going to sell any data. And if you look at the history of ag tech over the last 10, 20 years, particularly data-led ag tech, that's kind of, the very opposite way that you should do it, because you should look to partner with big aggregators and you should look to sell that data because that's where the money is, in theory. But we just don't believe in that, and we don't think that leads to a transformational impact in the industry. So that's great for us, but it does mean it's a hell of a long journey building those relationships down the farm drive, right? Building the relationship, building the reputation. And it goes with some knocks where the incumbent industry, in some cases, look at it and say, we're not ready for that sort of transformation, that sort of change, and we want to keep things as they are. But you've got to be thick-skinned, as Richard said. You've got to keep an eye on where you're going, and you just got to believe in yourself and your team and the customers that are giving you the feedback on the way, and that's what guides us.
So you're talking, both of you there, very much about talking to the right people, collaboration, and as you say, making the most of what support you can get. So how has Eagle Labs and the wider Barclays network actually supported you on your journey? Gareth?
Yeah, look, it's been a great relationship. Now, I think we moved into Eagle Labs in, now there's a question, 2016, I think. Maybe 2017. And it goes from the really practical, right, which people ask me this a lot, and please don't overlook the practical, which is that as a space, it's fantastic, right? It's well run, it's flexible. There's loads of interesting peers in there from different industries. And pre-COVID, a few of the CEOs would get together quite often and have a few too many beers and, share some things that is actually pretty hard to share as a CEO normally, right? So it gives you that peer network on your doorstep, which is really good. Getting a bit closer to the business, we've got a really good relationship with the Barclays agricultural team, who've been very helpful to us and very kind to us in the market. I think we're well aligned in what we're trying to do for banks and banking at the end of the day. And then we've got some, we've had some very, let's say, left field opportunities that I wouldn't normally look for, be that entrepreneurship awards that we've picked up through it, or meeting Prince Charles, or attending, some very high profile conferences and things like that. So it's really that sort of serendipitous opportunities that come through that sort of charm and delight you that you never expected from what is a working space on paper.
And yourself, Richard. So what support have you managed to really dig deep on from what we've got within the Eagle Lab structure?
And I think my journey is a little bit different from Gareth's there, because not only I'm not from the UK. We came up with the idea in Ireland, and of course the recession was blowing a gale in about 2015 in Ireland, with the banks and everything collapsing. So we couldn't raise even a fiver in Ireland at the time. So we decided to try our luck in Cambridge, because the Cambridge Council had decided to put out a grant. And of course, we needed a home base. And knowing nobody in Cambridge whatsoever and just finding places like Eagle Labs has been like a revelation for us. Because it plugs you into the ecosystem where you didn't know anyone. Now you know 10 or 20 people, who then know another 10 or 20 people, who know other people. And then you start going to events. There's always great events there. There's great support there from Eagle Labs. The staff can't do enough for you. I think I've always said about Cambridge is that the reason I put it on my business card is because it makes me sound far more intelligent than I actually am on paper, really. And that's Eagle Labs. It's given us a really professional address. People take us very, very seriously when they see us there. The staff have been great. From the support from the wider Barclays community has been amazing. We were profiled in the Sunday Times thanks to Barclays, and we also went to San Francisco on the inaugural AgriTech trip to San Francisco, which was an amazing trip. I mean, they put us up. They treated us like royalty when we were there. We were put up in Google's Lawyers HQ, which was fantastic. But it was fantastic because they brought us to 500 startups. We got some great advice and insight from some of the top people in Silicon Valley. So I can't really recommend Eagle Labs enough. It's like a very small family. It's really good. You could be as engaged or as disengaged as you really want to be. But I would really recommend being really engaged because so much more comes from it than you'd actually think on paper. As Gareth said, just being just a working space. It's far more than that. And I sit beside Gareth's team, so I learn a lot by earwigging as well. So that's a good bonus too.
I think that's amazing.
Richard can probably describe some of our challenges and lows better than I can right through this.
I expect an invoice in the post from Gareth in the morning for a consultancy fee.
No, you two, behave, please. That's an amazing journey, and it's nice to hear so much positive feedback around sort of the AgriTech program and the support that you get within Eagle Labs. What do you think the future looks like for AgriTech? What do you personally feel could be the next big thing? Ooh, who's going to answer that one? Gareth.
Look, that's the $1 million question, right? In many cases, I had a terrific time when I was back at Syngenta in the venture capital team, looking at all these different sort of subsectors within AgriTech, and there's so much excitement. One of the things I would just probably caution, and I think this is echoed a lot in the industry, is that AgTech is sort of in a risky position at the moment. I think if you talk to farmers day in, day out, there's a mixed perception of what AgTech is. And there are some great stories out there that don't really deliver the substance for the farmer at the end of the day. And I think we need to be very careful not to encourage those. And I think those will come to the fore, and to leave the playing field open for those who are really delivering value to the industry or to the farmer at the end of the day. But there is a risk position for AgTech as a brand. For me personally, and I think this is probably because they're far from our focus at Yagro, and I've got some very good friends working in those areas. There's two big, moonshot areas that I'm really interested in. One is around customized farm genetics. And this particularly in crop, but breeding for your specific environment or your specific business goals for your farm. And there's some really, really interesting stuff going on in the US around that. And the other one is actually synthetic protein and replacing bulk protein production so that farming and farmers can focus much more on the high value add ingredient production. I think that seems like a logical end game for where we're going as a society. But how you build a business around that and who's going to win in that space, I have no idea.
Yeah, it is difficult to say, pick out what is going to lead and what isn't. So what are your thoughts on that then, Richard? Do you think there's going to be one big next thing, or very much like Gareth, being a bit cautious?
It's an interesting question. It's actually a good question. It's one we've been pondering a lot ourselves. I mean, if food is life, then I think data is fertilizer. And anything going forward now in AgTech, I think the marriage between AgTech and the next generation of AgTech companies will be the marriage of AgTech and FinTech companies, the aggregators. If you cast your mind back to where the internet was in about 2001, 2002, we're, in my opinion, in AgTech 1.0. So we're taking data directly from an animal. The next challenge is to take all that data and aggregate it and do something with it. And if you think about where that was in the internet time, you were talking about companies like Yahoo, we were talking companies like that. Now we're talking about companies like data aggregators like Airbnb, Facebook, that sprung from all of that, people like Google and all of their different things that all sprung from that. So I believe that the next big thing is the nexus between taking that data and making it profitable. So the next big nexus for me is the data aggregators will be the next 2.0 companies, will be agtech plus fintech, and they will be super profitable companies, I think. And they will be really, really interesting generation and breed to see. But who's going to say a red sea? Is one going to eat them all, or is it going to be a blue sea? I think it's more like it's going to be a blue sea, and there'll be different grades of variations in the companies. But I think it's going to be a fascinating time for agri-tech, because as agri-tech and fintech inevitably must come closer, there's going to be huge opportunities for middle aggregation and things like that, great marketplaces, and new companies and new ideas that we haven't even thought about yet. As they said before, by 2030, 60% of the graduates today will not be employed. It will be in industries that have not even been created yet. And I think that's a really exciting space to be in. If I was going to start another agri-tech company again, I would probably wait a little bit and go into that, because that sounds super exciting. It's whoever's going to build on the hard work that Gareth and myself are doing, putting things on animals, putting sensors and analytics in, and doing all that hard graft. Hopefully they'll come in and use some of our products then to create new and more fantastic companies that will be a benefit not only to the farmers but to the world and to the environment. And it is a mission. It is a mission of our time to try and feed the world without destroying it. So that's where I think it's going to go, and that's where I would be putting my money if I was a betting man.
Really, really interesting. And I think that quite nicely leads on to my next trail of thought, because you've both done it, and you're involved in it at the moment. So you've just said there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of innovation to come. What one piece of advice would you give to a new startup entering into the agri-tech industry? Yourself, Richard.
It would probably be the advice I would gave to myself before you commit an ounce of time or paper or money or anything that you're going to do, because what you're going to do is going to be paid in sacrifice for you and your family. Is I would do a huge amount of research into the area that you're going to be in. If the companies, like, for example, when I was trying to tell people I was going to put sensors on cattle, when I went to Samsung in South Korea, and they thought I was on drugs. And now it's kind of a little bit de rigueur. I went to people who were so-called experts, and they told me it could never be built. My product could never be built. And yet here we are, 4 years later, and it's built. So firstly, don't mind the experts, but be so well read and be so well up on your area that you can, because you're going to come across one of these so-called experts who will tell you you're wrong. At least you can argue with them in a kind of logical way and prove to yourself if you're right. The first thing I did before I started Herdsy is I wrote a 40-page business plan on the weekend to convince myself. And I said, if any time in that plan, at that time, if I came up with something that would put it, was the death knell for it or would stop it, I said, I'm going to stop and I'm not going to continue with this idea. And I'd probably recommend that to do anyone. If you're going to spend 4 or 5 years of your life plus, take a weekend, type out a business plan or something and make sense, and get somebody who you trust, not your mom, to do a sanity check on it and just see if you're correct and run figures and run cash flows. But that's probably the accountant in me coming out anyway, but that's what I would recommend to people to do.
And yourself, Gareth, what would you give as a key piece of advice for anybody looking to come into agri-tech as a startup?
Look, Richard's described it eloquently. I think it's like all startups, but I think it's acute in agriculture. It's going to take a while. It's going to take longer than you think. It's going to take a heck of a lot of resilience. It's going to take a lot of patience. It's going to take a lot of adaptation. Be prepared for that. But one thing, and I think it builds on Richard's point, one thing we did an awful lot at the start was a bit of soul searching for ourselves as well. Was what do we as a founding team really, really want out of this, right? Are we aligned on this? Are we going to go through a hard journey all together with the right expectations and the right outcomes? What kind of culture do we want to build here, right? What kind of team, what kind of culture do we want to have? What kind of image we want to portray, these sound like fairly sort of nebulous questions to ask right at the outset, but actually that's been our North Star almost throughout. It's kept us rooted. We have a well-agreed view of who we are, what we're going to do, what we want to achieve, and then everything else sort of follows that. And so I would recommend, similar to Richard, spend the time ahead of launching in, just spend the time to have a really good think and set things down in stone that are to a large extent immutable. And hopefully that carries you through.
Really, really, really interesting. And I think you've both covered the point amiably. Very, very exciting industry, a lot of innovation, but it's not an easy journey. And I think that's got to be key, as I say, your resilience, your mental health and well-being, all very, very key points there. So hopefully the people that have been listening in have learnt firsthand what it is like to step into the wellies of some of the agri-tech businesses, and hopefully understand what support is out there, what resilience you need, and if Eagle Labs can provide some of that support, that's even better. I've really, really enjoyed having a chat with you today, and I think from what we've all talked about, I say it really is about feeding the world without wrecking the planet and taking that into consideration. And like we said, what you're doing there are tools that are supporting, not to replace the farmer. So thank you very much, guys. I've really, really enjoyed today. I hope you have too. Any last comments from you?
Thanks for having me on, Wendy. And let's see this industry go forward.
Thanks for having me on, Wendy. Very sorry. Thanks to Gareth for taking his time. It's been interesting. I'm sure I'll be getting that invoice at my desk any day soon. But I'd like to just take the time to say thanks to all the staff and people like that, and yourself, and people in Cambridge Labs. They've been super, and hope the Eagle Labs team and concept can go from strength to strength into the future.
Thank you. So as with all of our talks and presentations that we do, there will be a slide come up at the end, and it'll also be below the YouTube when you're watching it. And we're asking for feedback, because events like today and all the other events we do are really driven by what we want to do, but also we want to know what you want to see. So it's really key for us to get that feedback on your thoughts about today, thoughts about what you'd like to see for the future, because again, this can help us support that wider agriculture sector, the technology businesses that are looking at starting up within the industries. So please do. Once again, thank you so much, Gareth. Thank you so much, Richard. I've loved it. And I certainly know more in depth about your journeys than I probably did literally 30 minutes ago. And I really appreciate it. So thank you both.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.